The city's mission is where it all starts. It sets forth the purpose of the organization. And the purpose of the organization is what gives rise to the organization's goals. And then the organization undertakes activities in order to fulfill those goals, and the activities drive the cost. So by the time you're out on the cost end of the chain, everything has already been blessed as being part of executing the organization's mission. And if your mission is to support the community or enhance the community, there's no standard by which you can justify a cut. Hi, and welcome to the MuniFinanceGuy podcast. I'm Mark Moses, MuniFinanceGuy. Today, I want to talk about zero-based budgeting. And I'm not going to talk about it in a real technical sense. I'm going to talk about it in terms of why it hasn't worked. It's been around for 6 decades now, and it has never worked in government. But people keep trying it. And by the end here, I think you'll understand that it doesn't work. It hasn't worked because it cannot work. And I speak as somebody who tried it myself in one organization and got virtually no positive results from the process. And by the end here, I think you'll understand that that was not a one-off failure of zero-based budgeting, but it's something that is really in the nature of the zero-based budgeting approach. So what is it and what's the attraction? Well, first of all, it sounds good. It sounds rigorous. We're going to start at zero and make every expenditure, every line item, everything we spend justified. We're going to scrutinize it thoroughly. And in application, that can vary in terms of how rigorously that's applied, but that's really what brings people to the table, is the idea that we're going to, for once, really bear down and comb through our expenditures, our expenses. And so this all it started actually in government as an experiment with the USDA back in the early 60s. It admittedly did not yield very much. And so it really went nowhere. It was revived several years later by Texas Instruments, who applied it in private industry in an environment in which the managers had quite a bit of discretion how they scoped their activities for the year. And so that gave rise to a Harvard Business Review article that picked up on it. And that's really where government started taking an interest. They saw that this process met with some positive results for Texas Instruments, and so they wanted to apply that more broadly. And the person who's most famous for it is former President Jimmy Carter, who employed it as governor of Georgia in the late 70s. And again, this is government application, didn't go anywhere. He tried it again at the federal level when he was president a few years later. Again, no tangibly positive results. And so it comes up again and again in local government and cities. Every study I've seen shows that cities will attempt it. It never really sticks. In fact, one city, and this is typical of cities, the city of San Diego staff said they didn't even have enough capacity to even implement it, to even try to begin the process. And in a more extreme situation, San Antonio pushed back on the process, saying, hey, we're happy to dig in and look at all this, but what you're going to find out is that we need more funding. And so why does this happen? Why do attempts to cut costs even result in a pushback and identification of greater needs. And I think we have to go back to the causal chain here of what happens in what kind of causal order. The city's mission is where it all starts. It sets forth the purpose of the organization. And the purpose of the organization is what gives rise to the organization's goals. And then the organization undertakes activities in order to fulfill those goals, and the activities drive the cost. So by the time you're out on the cost end of the chain, everything has already been blessed as being part of executing the organization's mission. And if your mission is to support the community or enhance the community, there's no standard by which you can justify a cut. The working standard is basically, does anybody benefit from this activity? And it's so easy to say yes to that question that you wind up in a deadlock over in your prioritization or in your decisions to cut. So by the time you get to cost, it's already too late. And that's what I learned in my lesson, where I sat down. Couple of the council members wanted to see us try a zero-based budgeting approach for the new budget year. I sat down, and the first thing that popped up was 70% of the organization's costs are personnel, of the general fund's costs are personnel related. And they're already determined, that cost is already determined by the labor agreements. And not only is the cost already determined, there's many provisions in the labor agreements also set forth the way the workforce is deployed, the conditions of work, the schedules, the job descriptions. And so your ability to make changes to how much the workforce gets paid, how they're deployed, how they operate, what kind of job descriptions they work under, have already been determined. So now you have 70 to 75% of your costs already built in, and you haven't even warmed up to the task. Then you look at the contractual obligations, the things that just can't be unwound, because you're beginning the budget process about 6 months before the new fiscal year begins. And that's already too late to unwind most commitments, especially long-term commitments that require notice and quite a bit of coordination, sometimes with other agencies or businesses. So now you're up to 85% of your budget is spent. Then you look at your utility costs. Cities are big users of utilities, water to irrigate the parks, electricity, gas for the fleet of vehicles, electricity for the electric vehicles. So cities, municipalities are big consumers of utilities. Those are not easily cut. So now you're well into the 90% range of having already programmed the activities that for the year. And then you look at some pet programs and other kind of things that are too difficult to unwind because they're politically precious, favored. You don't want to bring in and rattle constituents who are going to come in and blame you for picking on them and cutting their programs. And you're lucky if by the time you're done, 100% of your resources have not been allocated. And that was my experience. What I really learned from that is by the time you sit down to prepare the budget, you're not deciding what the city is going to be through the budget. The budget is where you find out what the organization has already decided, what it's already committed to. And so a budget manager is not really doing financial planning or programming funds. He or she is really just identifying all these commitments that have already been made. And that's why it failed in my particular circumstance with my city. That's why you got the pushback in San Diego and San Antonio. That's why nobody really can apply it in any rigorous kind of way. And I think often they're not even expected to. I think sometimes zero-based budgeting sounds like something rigorous. And if you can say you've gone through the process uh, and this is the result you've gotten, now it clears the way to raise your fees or put another tax measure on the ballot. So what is the real answer? If zero-based budgeting is really not on point because it has the right idea about its rigor and about challenging the status quo, but it's operating too far down the causal chain after the key decisions have been made. What's the answer? Well, you need to apply a zero-based approach to the mission and goals of the organization and really scrutinize. If you've developed an unbounded mission, a vague mission where any goals can qualify as being legitimate goals because they benefit someone, then you have a setup for growing scope, for fiscal turmoil. You'll never have enough. And that's the kind of environment most cities operate in. And again, that's why San Antonio pushed back and said, if you want to study the budget, you're going to find we're underfunded and we need more. There's no place to cut. And that's why there's that feeling that there's never any place to cut. So the place to cut, the place to be rigorous is in the purpose of the organization. Is the organization still fulfilling its role as being the means to the ends of the residents and business owners, where it's protecting their rights, where it's protecting their ability to flourish? Or has it just become a service providing machine that hungers for more resources in order to fulfill its goal? That's it for today. Thank you. I'm Mark Moses, Muni Finance Guy. I'll see you next time.